The name Quisling is synonymous with being a traitor or a collaborator. But who was Quisling, and why did he end up with such a bad reputation? Well, on the 85th anniversary of the German invasion of Norway, I was exploring the life of one of Norway's most infamous traitors, Vidkun Quisling. Born on the 18th of July 1887 in the county of Telemark in southern Norway, Vidkun Abraham Lauritz Jonsson Quisling was a soldier turned politician. His father was a Lutheran pastor whose job took the family to Drammen, southwest of Oslo. Quisling was bullied at school for his Telemark dialect, which retained many elements of Old Norse. Despite this, he did well, with a particular liking for natural sciences and history. After completing his schooling, Quisling went on to the Norwegian Military College and graduated with the highest grades possible, and was accepted into the Norwegian Military Academy, where he graduated with the highest grades since its founding in 1817, and so impressive was his performance, he was invited to an audience with the King of Norway. In 1911 he joined the Norwegian Army's General Staff, and was initially earmarked to go to China after choosing that country as a speciality. But the Civil War prevented him from going, so he chose to study Russia and became a military attaché to Petrograd in May 1918, reporting on the aftermath of the Bolshevik Revolution. However, as you can imagine, the situation was dangerous. He was recalled and sent to Finland as an intelligence officer. After some time, he then went to the Ukraine to work with Fridtjof Nansen, a Norwegian polar explorer who had turned into a humanitarian worker. As a result of Stalin's policies of industrialization and collectivization, coupled with his brutal repression of the Ukrainian desire for independence, the famine that became known as the Holodomor, that killed anywhere between 3.5 and 10 million in Ukraine and the wider Soviet Union, was in full swing. The famine was barely known outside of the Soviet Union at the time, and Nansen and Quisling did their best to bring it to the attention of the Norwegian government and to Europe as a whole. Through the help of donors, they did manage to save thousands of Ukrainians from death, earning the gratitude of Ukrainians abroad, which, considering what the future held in store for Quisling, was quite something. Although initially attracted to communism, he eventually turned into what is now broadly known as fascism, which, considering his radical political ideas, was no surprise. Plus, the Soviet government had rejected his overtures on a few occasions, no doubt due to his work in Ukraine and also due to some work in Armenia. Borrowing the term universalism from Dutch scholar J. M. de Groot, Quisling tried to explain the entire world by producing a new world religion by combining physics and Christianity. His aim was to bring countries together in world unity by creating a collective consciousness that will be passed from the individual to the family to the nation. He then incorporated Nordic racial superiority, and his anti-Semitism showed itself for the first time, as world unity, he claimed, could only be achieved with Nordic leadership working against the Jews. Some time after returning to Norway in 1929, Quisling joined the Hungarian political party, serving as their defence minister from 1931 to 1933. After they refused to make him their party leader, he decided in May 1933 to form his own party, the National Samling, or National Unity in English. The party's policies were based around four tenets, which were a corporatist society, an emphasis on Christianity and nationalism, the paternalism of the state, and economic autonomy. Success evaded the new party, however, and they only gained 2.2% of the 1933 vote, which then dropped to 1.8% in the 1936 election. The outbreak of the Second World War, however, gave Quisling the opportunity to achieve the power he wanted, and in December 1939 he carried out the first act that will forever link his name to being a traitor. The Germans were anxious to protect their North Sea and Atlantic Ocean access, so Quisling met with Admiral Erich Raeder, head of the Kriegsmarine, and then with Adolf Hitler. He told him that the British planned to move into Norway for strategic purposes. This was one of the factors that led the Germans to plan the invasion of Norway and Denmark. And on the 9th of April 1940, the Germans landed in Norway. Quisling aided them by attempting a coup d'etat by radio, the first time anyone had tried it. A similar tactic would be attempted by the July bomb plotters in 1944. Quisling told the Norwegian people to welcome the Germans and declared himself as the new head of state and leader of the new Norwegian government. 2 hours later, he repeated the broadcast and warned anyone not complying that they would face the most serious of consequences. However, Quisling had been premature. The Norwegian king refused to accept his government, and the Nazis forced him to stand down on the 15th of April, only 6 days after announcing that he was the man in charge. The king's refusal to accept him meant that fighting continued in Norway until June of 1940, when Norway surrendered on the 19th. The king, the prime minister, and the Norwegian government went into exile in London, where they were still seen as the legitimate leadership of Norway. Although Hitler initially had been impressed with Quisling during the December 1939 meeting, he realised that he was unpopular with the Norwegian people, and so he put Josef Terboven, who was the Gauleiter, or district leader of Essen, in his place as Reichscommissioner. General von Valkenhorst retained military control of Norway. Quisling's party, however, was retained and formed the government, while other political parties were banned. Quisling then became the head of cabinet and was appointed Prime Minister of the puppet national government in early 1942. His attempts to ingratiate himself with the Nazis, however, made him more and more unpopular with the Norwegian people. He attempted to set up a Norwegian version of the Hitler Youth, but this caused massive civil unrest and caused the resignations of teachers and clergymen. Quisling became further entrenched and told the people that the new regime was in charge, whether they liked it or not. His masters in Berlin, however, realised that Quisling was a liability and began to take less and less notice of him. Attempting to get back into the Nazis' good books, he became involved in the recruitment of Norwegians for service in the German armed forces. But only around 1,500 were ever recruited to the Norwegian Legion, which was eventually disbanded in 1943, with those members who wished to serve being transferred to the 11th SS Panzergrenadier Division Nordland. He also brought his anti-Semitism to the fore and reenacted the Jewish paragraph of the Norwegian constitution. This paragraph of the constitution prevented Jewish immigration to Norway, but it had been removed over 90 years previously, in 1851. Between October and November 1942, Quisling signed a raft of new laws similar to those that had been passed in Germany between 1933 and 1939, enabling the arrest of all Norwegian Jewish men, confiscating all Jewish assets and property, and requiring the registration of all Norwegian Jews. When the Germans invaded, there were roughly around 2,100 Jews in Norway, including around 350 refugees from Germany and Austria. Using previously developed plans, Norwegian police began to arrest Jews all over Norway and began to send them to Oslo in preparation for deportation. In groups of varying sizes, deportations began on the 26th of November 1942. 772 Norwegian Jews were sent to Auschwitz. Just 34 men survived the war, with the vast majority having been sent to the gas chambers on arrival. Luckily for most of the Jewish population of Norway, there were many sympathetic Norwegian policemen, and along with the underground resistance movement, around 1,000 escaped to neutral Sweden, while many more went into hiding. When the war ended, Quisling knew he was in serious trouble, despite having tried to negotiate a peace deal with Germany towards the end of the war and telling the police not to offer the Allies any resistance. When the exiled government returned, he and his ministers turned themselves in, and he was placed on trial and found guilty of high treason, murder, embezzlement, theft, aiding a foreign government, and a variety of other crimes. His defence was that he'd only been acting in the best interests of Norway with the intention of restoring her independence. But the courts didn't agree, and he was sentenced to death, being executed in Oslo on the 24th of October 1945. Vidkun Quisling left a legacy, but not one that he wanted or expected. After the war, anyone accused of being a traitor of any kind, even a child telling on another, would often be known as a Quisling. That concludes today's episode. Thank you all for watching. Big shout out to my dad who came up with the script for this video and helped massively in the research of it. If you all enjoyed, don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.